This is Kristin.
And this is Steve, and you are listening to Cycling Together, a show all about bikes, riding, and riding together.
It is my turn to wear the wool jersey. And here's my question. What year did we buy these?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
These are the original wool jerseys of the shop. Now, I know I had this in Iceland in about 2017, I think that would have been, 2018.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to say 2015.
Close. 2016.
2016.
2016. We probably started it in 2015. Wait, no. What did you just say? 2015? Yes, because it's 2025. Yes. And one of the reasons I wanted to point that out is they have held up really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
We wear them a ton, right? We wear them.
Yeah, and I wear
great.
that externally as a riding sweater.
Right.
So, and the amazing thing about merino wool sweaters is you can splatter them with mud. You can wear them mountain biking or gravel riding, splatter them with mud, and honestly, you could be sitting around after, and everything, all it dries, the mud splatter dries off, and you shake it, and then suddenly you're like, well, I don't even need to clean this. It's not. It's clean.
This is the only time we did a Steve the Bike Guy wool sweater.
Mm-hmm.
We have done Yeti Hunter.
Oh, yeah?
We have done Ruckus.
Right. But
we have not done another one.
Oh, interesting.
Until this year. I just released the pre-order for our brand new black STBG race flag jerseys. Same place. We're going to get them from Oregon.
Yep.
Basically same cut. Unfortunately, unisex cut. They don't have women's and men's, but I find it's okay. They form fit enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited, but I didn't realize it had been that long since we had even done them. And it was one of those where I was like, I do have these great pictures of you. You took some from me. Also, we went up to Lake Placid. Lake Placid was their first time out when we did our fat bike vacation with the kids. And so I have these pictures where I was like, pose like you're a model, because we had to sell them. We had to sell them.
Right.
You work cheap. So I had you, and there's one of me like head down, baseball hat on, like. Mm-hmm. So,
I remember that.
Yeah, that's Lake Placid.
Yes.
We had just gotten these.
And I will say, those wool sweaters and all the variations that we own are some of my favorite pieces of clothing.
Yeah, I sometimes rip out the pit.
Do you?
I do.
What are you doing to them?
I don't know what I'm doing, but they have held up really well. The biggest tell is that it says Velo Studio. That is the biggest tell, but it has held up really well. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, I'm excited about the new ones
then. That's our news. So today we're going to be talking about something that is all over the news, and it is tariffs.
Tariffs.
And I want to make sure that I feel like you can't talk about tariffs without it taking a political turn. We are not taking a political stance on any of this. Mm-hmm. We just want to talk about the fact that it is going to inevitably impact the prices of bicycles and bicycle parts. Tariffs have always been a thing, right? It's again, we've always paid tariffs. But as I understand it, manufacturers might shift around where things were made in a way to reduce tariffs, right?
Yeah, and the tariffs themselves, even on some of the existing tariffs that there were in the low single digits.
Right.
In
so
terms
you
of
had
percentage.
It always seemed to be like China was where you wanted to get out of, and so they would make things in like other places, right?
And that was, because tariffs there were on and off and higher, and there was definitely more concern about what might happen with the different trade policies with China.
Right.
So it was a lot of companies sort of diversifying and trying to spread around and get out of China a bit more.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I was reading an article from Velo magazine, and here's one quote. The fact of the matter, however, is that based on what folks in the bike industry tell us, there's hardly anything at all that won't be affected by tariffs. That goes for bikes that are made in Asia all the way down to the local bag maker who doesn't source their materials domestically. So Bicycle Retailer reports that 87% of bikes entering the U.S. come from China, Taiwan, and Cambodia, meaning 88% of bikes coming to the U.S. are subject now to a minimum 43% tariff. And I'll admit, I don't want to say I'm not a math person. I'm not strong on like tariff math, but I thought there was another article in USA Today, actually, where Stephen Frothingham, the editor-in-chief for Bicycle Retail and Industry News, basically tried to give us an idea of what that might look like.
How that works out.
Right. How that works out. Right. So he said, a 25% tariff does not mean an item will cost 25% more. He said, a rule of thumb I've heard people in the industry use is that a $1 increase of import cost equals a $3 increase in retail on the showroom floor. So let's say a chain is normally $10 at import value. You put a 25% tariff on it. Now its value is $12.50. Which gets passed to the distributor who takes a margin. Then it goes to the retailer who takes a margin. So if you use the 3-to-1 rule of thumb, the price of the chain would raise from $10 to $17.50.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little frightening.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, but we don't really know. Everybody's saying we don't really know because you could have some importers who eat a little bit of it. You could have some companies overseas eat a little bit of it.
Yes.
So we don't really know, but that's kind of a nice, I like rules of thumb.
Yeah. And where we sit now is the disruption that this is going to cause, and the disruption because of the uncertainty of the tariffs.
Yes.
The tariffs went into effect almost immediately. A couple things are waiting until I think May 3rd, but who knows? That the problem that we have been set up with is, will these tariffs be here next week? Will they be here next month? Right. Will they be a different rate next week?
Yep.
And you don't know that. And what that means is a lot of companies are going to just, for right now, this early or April, just wait.
Yeah.
Wait. And I just 10 minutes ago read an article of Parley saying we're just going to hold off ordering parts right now because we don't know, and this is the worst case scenario we think right now. So why get anything?
Yes, and actually in the same USA article, Frothingham said, I was with some people who make bike tools. One of them said, we just don't know what to do. We don't know what step to take next or whether we should shift our production. Like they just don't. And I know you see it yourself in, talking about 'tis the time to order bikes.
It is. Right now it is.
Any, and you don't even know if you should or what you should buy. So it's just, there's a lot of uncertainty. I had two categories in my mind. One was you have a bike, and one is you need a bike.
So right now, if you need a bike,
yes,
go get it.
Go get it. Yes.
I think that's...
Like if you're in the market, you've been looking for a new bike, you know the bike, or you're close to just get it.
Right. And let's just lay it out there right now in terms of the past 2 years, year and a half have been nothing but fire sales in a lot of ways. Prices, discounts on the prices of bikes that you will never see, all of us will never see in our lifetime again.
Why?
And that was the post-COVID issue. So all of the companies thinking that the COVID boom times in the bicycle industry were going to keep rolling. And some of that is because a lot of venture capital came into the industry, and those guys just thought, they came in because they saw all of the booming times in the industry, right? And they just
during COVID.
And then they just made these nice increasing projections, and they ordered lots of bikes, and then the just total collapse in demand happened.
Because it turned out people had bought their bikes. And
people had bought their bikes. Yeah. People who only really got it because it was something to do during COVID, all that type of thing.
Okay. So we saw an oversupply. So we went into the pandemic. We didn't have enough. Then as we came out of the pandemic, everyone was super excited about all the bikes that had been bought. So they ordered a ton of bikes.
Yes.
And it turns out
which took a long time to get.
Yes.
So at the same time, a lot of those bikes were still back ordered at the factories, and they took longer to get. So there was this delay between getting excess supply and the demand dropping off, and then suddenly all these companies were left with massive quantities of bikes in storage and no buyers.
Yes.
Yep.
What I want to do, I don't want to tell people to rush out and buy a bike, because if it's not the right bike, if not, because I do think we saw a little about that during the pandemic, is that people would buy a bike because it was the bike.
Oh, I'm not saying do that. Right.
Right. It was the bike they could get. And now maybe they're replacing that because it wasn't necessarily the bike they wanted. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is, if you know the bike you want and you can get it,
yes,
you should go ahead and do that.
Yes.
Because it's probably at the best price.
Yes.
It's going to be.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Even if it's, right now as things stand, of course, with the tariffs, it's either on a good sale or it's at or near its regular price, which, if the tariffs remain in effect, is going to be way better price than they're going to be coming up.
Right. Assuming that the retailer you're visiting has not jacked it in anticipation of the...
And that could be the case.
That could have... No, I mean...
I have heard that any bikes that are still on that clearance pricing, that's going to be going away, and maybe even just this week.
Yeah. Because
now all of the retailers and the manufacturers, the bike brands, are going to say, all right, we have moved most of this inventory, but now we need to hold on to this inventory that we have not overspent on because of the tariffs.
Yeah.
And that will also let us maybe wait out before we order a little more to find out what's going to happen, because they don't know what's going to happen either.
I did read that some manufacturer sites are quietly removing like the sign up for our e-news and get 10% off, or sign up for like those little things that you could have gotten are starting to disappear, because again, in anticipation of they need to make the most they can off the bikes,
right?
Which I'm not.
I also just read, so it was a good article about Tern, the cargo bike maker, right? And they make a lot of e-cargo bikes, really, really nice bikes. So they actually have a whole shipment on the water right now.
Okay.
And if that gets in, and I can't remember the exact dates coming up, but basically it was a case where in the normal what was planned to arrive in, I think probably the port of Los Angeles or Long Beach or whatever, and then it was going to be split up and go to a couple of their warehouses and so forth. Well, under that scenario, it was going to miss the deadline, and they were going to have to pay $1 million in tariff fees on that shipment, which would basically bankrupt the place, right? As opposed to, I think it was going to be 7,000, something like that. Maybe it was 70,000. Anyway, huge difference.
Right. Huge difference. All because of a couple of days. Because a storm came through and slowed down the boat for a couple of days.
Yeah. So exactly. So right now, I think they had said if the boat gets in on time, the plan is to sort of immediately truck it somewhere so that it gets logged in. It's going to beat it by like a day or two, right? There is no margin for error there,
right?
That's just you can't. I mean, their stock was already on the water, and right.
I feel like there should be. Well, again, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to work through. It is what it is. Let's continue with if you need a bike. So that's new bike,
right?
You're in the market. You know what you want. Go get it.
Yes.
Hopefully what's at the bike shop is pre-tariff pricing, because some shops do have a lot of inventory, or they have, so they're the ones to talk to. And that might be a larger bike shop. We don't have a lot of inventory. We have a little bit,
right? But
we're not going to have a lot of pre-tariff
right. And there's still a few really phenomenal deals on bikes that I can order from the warehouse.
Yes.
And again, as I have a suspicious feeling that those discounts are going to go away this week.
Right. And you have to decide if you want to snag a couple. That's which
Yes. And earlier this week, in fact, I think the day before the tariffs were announced, I think Tuesday morning or something like that, I was talking to another brand, which we're not announcing yet, and I was going to sign on with them, and I probably still will, but it's a case now of, but what's happening with your pricing?
Yes.
I can't, right? I can't now sign on as a dealer and buy a bunch of bikes right now because I don't know what's going to happen, so now I have to wait.
Well, this is probably better for an offline conversation, but there is something to be said. If you order it from them right now at the price that is shown right now, that's got to be their pre-tariff price,
right? Well,
which
this
I assume they're going to honor.
Is all questions I have for them now.
Yeah, so you can see how difficult it's going to be for every size business to figure out. And I know when we talk about tariffs, one of the things people say is, well, you should just buy American. Just buy American. And there are a couple of American bike brands.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit, because I also want to sort of look back in time at American bikes.
Oh, okay. How long is this podcast? Back in the day.
Yeah, so there are some American bikes, and Envy makes frames in the United States. Allied makes frames in the United States.
Lightspeed?
I believe, and I have not checked on this, but Trek made their very, very top spec bikes in the United States. I don't know if that's still the case. I should know that, but I don't know that anymore.
We have our local brand, Seven.
Yes, Seven that makes. There's frames. A bunch of custom frame builders out there, like Seven and others. Moots, if we're in the titanium space. Linsky.
Yes.
All of these companies are making metal frames in the United States, titanium and steel, and so there are options there, but they are all the top of the end of the spectrum.
Well, and the materials are getting tariffed. So if they have materials that are coming in from kind of like the example that Frothingham said, it could be, or in one of the articles said, it could just be your bag maker who's getting material from they could be a US based bag maker, but they're getting material from a different country. And the parts are still all the components.
Well, anything on the full bike is still coming from, yes.
Okay.
All the SRAM parts are coming from Taiwan. Shimano is coming from a lot from Japan, some from Malaysia. The low end for Shimano is coming on, some come from China. You're not going to find that on your
So there's
titanium
no way
bikes,
to get an entirely 100% built USA bicycle.
Oh, it's been done in this sort of like experiment of, can we build a bicycle 100%?
Not the reasonable, the normal person in the world.
No, it's using these really, really sort of boutique CNC derailleurs from, I think Paul makes one, and there's another company I can't remember. So it's a case of, can it be done, and it can be done, but it's not something people are going to buy.
Okay, thank you. Not
really
for the mass market.
No, it's not.
A guy, a person could do it if they were truly committed.
There are a couple of, there's actually a few American-made companies for parts, like Wolf Tooth out of Minnesota, and they make chain rings and headsets, and Industry 9, and Chris King is a famous one. And there's a bunch of, like we mentioned, Envy, but also Zip rims. If you're in, again, this is all high-end stuff. So their carbon rims are made in the United States. So, but of course, if you get a full wheel, they're using hubs that
Spokes
are not.
and hubs and tires and sealant and all that other stuff.
Right. Orange Seal. So, So Orange Seal's sealant is made in the United States. So there's a good one. So there are options that will probably not see the price increases. Then again, this is how things work. If a company's competitors all raise their prices because of tariffs, then even though an American company isn't seeing tariffs, they can raise their prices a little bit, because
they can, but also remember that other stuff may be impacted. let's use Orange Seal. Where are their labels made? Where are their bottles made? Where are all the chemicals coming from? Where are the screw tops coming from? Where does the nozzle come from that lets you put it in it? So one of the articles I read was that you'll see one way that companies might try to keep prices level and accommodate for tariffs is they won't include batteries. They might reduce some of their packaging, right? So some of it will be cost savings, inefficiencies. Some will be you get less shrinkage. Maybe Orange Seal has to reduce the amount of orange seal you get in a way to keep things. So there are going to be lots of ramifications. But the point of every article I've read is that there is no one escaping the tariffs.
Right.
Because everything is impacted.
You look at Wolf Tooth, Industry 9, and Chris King, they rely on a lot of aluminum. Well, that's all tariffed.
Right.
So
it's just can't necessarily just buy American when it comes to a bicycle, because short of some very specific situation, it is not possible to do. Okay.
And we can go now. So I said we could go back in time here, and we can a little bit. So let's roll back the clock to say even just the 90s. Cannondale, all the Cannondale aluminum frames were they were welded in Pennsylvania.
I bought you a Cannondale road bike that was made in the USA.
Yep.
Yes, I did.
And they were normal competitive pricing.
Yeah.
Your first mountain bike, a Trek 850, it was the bottom entry-level mountain bike, and it had a chromoly steel frame.
Yes.
And that was made in Wisconsin. That was made in the United States. And I remember an article. I have a Le Mans Tête de Course, which is a titanium and carbon fiber bike. And there was a whole article about how Trek went to their factory and then pulled their very best welders to come onto the Le Mans project. And that was a USA-made frame, welded in Wisconsin. The carbon fiber was laid up in Wisconsin.
Well, we know from, say, Allied that they can make carbon.
Yep.
What I would like to see when we talk right now about anything that's USA-made, you've said it a couple of times, it's the high-end stuff. And that's unfortunate because the tariffs are going to hit the entry-level stuff pretty hard, right? Kids' bikes are also getting smacked with this.
There are some companies, though, that do make the low-end bikes in the U.S.
Cool.
With all foreign parts.
Well, that's
because that's where the components come from. But they are making the frames in the U.S. So,
So we talked about pre-tariff stock. We talked about whether or not you could buy American. Is there anything in the custom build territory as a way to save, or to save with a better pricing? Like buy a frame, say, and then build it up yourself, or have somebody build it? Is that one way that you could possibly save?
You
on
always
tariffs?
No, doubtful. So you always save money by buying a full bike over trying to build it from individual parts.
Okay.
In most cases, you could be very creative and where you get all your parts. So I'm going to shop this sale here, and my buddy has this one part, so I'm saving money there, and so forth.
If you're handy, maybe. If you're me, no.
And you're able to build up the entire bike from scratch. Yes, absolutely. So it could be possible to do that, but not realistically for a normal bike buyer.
You should take your time. Do not panic and buy the first bike that you get, because it is a larger waste of money to buy the wrong bike than to buy a bike with a tariff increase on it.
Yes. And it's
that makes sense?
And that's always the case no matter what. It is always more expensive to buy the wrong bike, the wrong size bike, the slightly lesser bike. Some people who are getting into it buy the entry-level bike. They could afford one or two steps up. They end up loving it, and now they're like, this isn't gonna. I need something different.
We were going to talk about upgrades on the bike you already own, but I think that's a good thought too, which is when you buy a bike, if you go into it thinking that you can, so I'm able to get this bike and then I'll upgrade it. Not all bikes are upgradable, right? Like we were talking very specifically about a recent example where we had two bikes.
So those are entry-level bikes. And one was a Trek Marlin, I believe, and the other was a Specialized, I think, Hard Rock Sport.
Okay.
By two teen riders who are racing in the U-Cycling League.
Yes.
Both of these kids asked if they could add droppers to these bikes. And both of these bikes had internal routing of the shift cables. So they had ports at the head tube, and then they came out a big port at the bottom, both aluminum frames.
Okay.
All these companies had to do was add in one hole on the back side of the seat tube, and and both these bikes would have been dropper ready for virtually any dropper on the market. Okay. But instead, they didn't add that one hole. They already have holes, a big hole at the bottom for all the cables to come out, and ports at the top, and they couldn't add that one hole. And now these kids have to use an externally routed cable dropper.
Okay.
Of which you basically have two choices in the market. One Chaos one, which is really expensive, like $320 retail. That when you have a bike was $600-700 retail, that's not what these parents are looking to spend.
Right.
And then the other one, which I believe is only maybe $150-160 retail, but I have looked many times. It's been out of stock for at least 6 months from two different distributors that I use.
Because it's $150 retail. Right?
Yeah, maybe, but the options for externally routed droppers are just now down to a couple options, and it's not great.
Right. Why don't they put holes in those frames?
This drives me nuts. I think they do it purposefully to promote upgrading to their next model series. Right?
Yep.
And that is so frustrating.
And it means that this goes back to what we were just talking about, which is if you buy a bike thinking that it is upgradable, you want to, unfortunately, think about what those upgrades might be and ask the question, can it be upgraded?
Right. And so in the mountain bike world, the derailleurs and your handlebars and obviously tires and all those sort of bolt-on parts are typically upgradable. Okay. So when it comes down to what you're getting to think, okay, can I live with this and grow with this bike? You're looking for things like that dropper compatibility if it doesn't come with a dropper. So the other thing is the head tube, because if it came with a low-end suspension fork, it might not have a head tube that is 1.5 on the bottom. And so therefore, if you ever wanted to upgrade the suspension fork to something good, it won't fit. Right. Not without... Either won't fit or not without a headset modification.
Okay. But even stuff but someone at the shop today, this week, she tried a bike, couldn't stand over it. It was a 29er. Yeah. Immediately you say, well, she probably needs a 27.5. You cannot put that on that bicycle. That bicycle does not have the geometry for a 27.5. You can't just assume you can swap out wheels. This seems obvious to you. It's not obvious. It wasn't obvious to her. It's not always obvious to me, because then you're like, well, if you do that, then your crank is hitting the ground. Like there's ramifications that you may not as a consumer recognize.
You were knowledgeable enough to say, could you swap the 29 to 27.5? Yes. So you had this knowledge base of thinking, well, maybe we could just put up the smaller wheels, and therefore it would lower the bike just a little bit, and that's all she needed. She needed 3/4 of an inch.
Yes.
Because otherwise, in a riding position, it fit her, but because of her shorter legs, it didn't fit her in standover.
She couldn't stand over it.
So, but correct, right? You can't just do that on a bike that was designed for 29-inch wheels, and that does not have what's called a flip chip in order to adjust the geometry.
Right.
Yeah. Because she'd be too low to the bike would be too low to the ground, and she'd be smacking the pedals and the crank all the time.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So if you can't buy new, or you want to look to avoid tariffs, another way to get a bike without a tariff would be used.
Used. Right.
Pre-owned. Right. So we've talked a little bit about how bike shops often have pre-owned, whether they're demos. I know after the winter that Ranch Camp up in Stowe was selling off a bunch of fat bikes because their season was over. Right. So those are demo bikes. They can be a really good deal. There's consignment bikes. There's pre-owned. Then there's the other side of things, which is Facebook Marketplace, eBay. What are some things to be aware of when you're talking about Facebook Marketplace and eBay?
Facebook Marketplace can be a great one. I see a lot of people complain. I have limited experience using it.
Yeah.
And I hear it's more of a problem for sellers. Is that you constantly get inquiries, and then those people just ghost you.
My favorite are the people that will post a bike and they'll say, "Don't ask me if it's still available. If you can still see it, it's still available." That seems to be the number one thing, because it's a Facebook automated, when you open it and you click the thingy that says contact.
Hi, is this still available?
Hi, is this still available? Is the first.
Never.
Right.
Because I've responded to looking to buy a few things. I'm like, well,
right.
If this person is not going to pay attention unless I make it look like I'm a real person and really ask about your product.
Yeah.
I would be concerned about stolen bikes on Facebook Marketplace.
How do you know if a bike has been stolen? How do you protect yourself from that?
There is a stolen bike registry, I believe. Oh. We should look into that and see if we can post that. Otherwise, the biggest thing to look for is turn the bike upside down and look for the serial number and see if the serial number has been scratched off, written over, somehow defaced. Yep. Okay. If you were always, when you're looking at a used bike, look for that serial number. If it is defaced or missing at all, do not get that bike.
Yes. Okay. The site is bikeregister.com. It's the National Cycle Database. It's a free service for people purchasing secondhand bikes who wish to check the status of the bike on the Bike Register database. So this is where you can check if your bike has been stolen. I think the other good sign is they don't know what the hell they're talking about with the bike. If it's either just a banging deal, too good to be true, and have zero understanding of the bike. Yes. Who wrote it? When did they get it? Who did it belong to? Anything. If they can't tell you anything about the bike, I would be very suspicious.
Right.
That they got that in wrongly. They stole it. That's what I would say. Sometimes you will see bike shops that will, and you collect the serial number for all the bikes that you sell, right? Or at least,
the bikes that I sell, and then that serial number is on people's receipts.
Right. So it's on the receipt, but you would see. Sometimes I've seen bike shops say like a customer's bike was stolen, or just keep it. If you can keep an eye out for this bike, so you can maybe work with your local bike shop on that. And then there's the second tier that I don't think that most average consumers know about. Pink Bike.
Pink Bike is a website.
Yes.
It is now a fairly well-known website in the mountain bike world. It is owned by Outside Magazine now.
Okay.
Right, which is...
They own
is that
everything.
Also a Warner Brothers thing now?
They own everything. I feel like Outside. They own Bike Reg. They own
it's
everything.
Part of a big conglomerate now.
Yes.
But they do have a buy and sell forum.
Okay.
It is great for sellers because it's free.
Yep.
I have used it. And there's no back and forth in terms of ratings or so forth, so you don't know how good a seller is. Yep. But it tends to be enthusiasts on there.
Okay.
And so far, I have bought and sold on there and have no problems.
Okay.
So it is definitely a place to look for for mountain bikes. They do have gravel and road sections. I would say less people are looking there, but that also might mean that you could find something without a lot of competition also looking for other categories.
Okay. That reminds me actually to go back to Facebook for a minute. There is a way to sell things not just in the general marketplace where you're next to pinball machines and shoes and baby equipment, which is to go to specific groups. There's one called New England Bike Classifieds.
Oh, okay.
Right? So there's one called that. There's another one that is a bike swap specific for the bicycle league that the kids that we work with, the kids race in. So
There's
that could be another
one for
way.
Vintage parts.
Yeah. So that is one way you can, if you are more comfortable in the Facebook marketplace world, protect yourself a little bit from just general everything.
Right. And I've also posted stuff on Craigslist and gotten responses out of that. But I've also posted paid as a commercial business.
Yeah.
So I think that perhaps my response is a little bit better because people were responding knowing that I was a bike shop and then coming to the shop where it could be a little bit more tricky between two private parties.
Yeah.
But I'd say Craigslist is right in that same realm as Facebook.
Okay.
I mean, getting a used bike can be a really great way. It's going to avoid the tariffs. It is one of those things, though, that I tell people you have to be knowledgeable about what you're looking at and what you're getting, because you have to be. I have gotten people who've bought a used bike, and I sort of just you want to help them and you want to be enthusiastic about what they bought, but you also go,
I can't believe you spent so much on this.
And I've had people go, this is vintage. I'm like, this is probably from about 92. And their face sinks because they had no idea what they bought was over 30 years old. They're probably thinking it's 5-6 years old.
Oh.
Yes, you get that a lot.
And I mean, in some of those, it's fine. In some of those, we had one woman come a couple of years ago. She went to an estate sale and she just found the cutest Scott bike, perfect condition.
Yes.
Totally vintage. She knew it was vintage. I think she was just going to use it on the rail trail. And it was a win-win-win all across the board. It was just such a great deal. But yes, if you're looking for more of a performance bike and you thought you were getting something that was newer, I can see being disappointed.
Right. I had a guy come the other day. He brought me 2 bikes. He brought me, I don't know where he got them, but he was basically wanted to get my opinion. One was a full bike. And so it was, will this bike fix up and I can use this, or should I use the parts off of this? And he had a partial other bike. Okay. So he brought them. One was a vintage 90s Trek.
Okay.
Exceptional condition for its age and era. So he pulls it out and I go, well, the first issue here is this is a 21-inch frame is how mountain bikes used to be. They used to go by the inches.
Okay.
So extra large.
Yes.
And you're 5'7", you can't even stand over this bike. And the first thing he's like, oh, I didn't even realize that.
Oh,
right?
No. Yep.
So I said, okay, so this does not fit you, but let's take a look at the other bike. So then the other bike was a specialized mountain bike. His size that could work.
Okay.
It was covered in stickers, which it always worries me a little bit. I mean, when I say covered, I mean covered.
I've seen those.
Is somebody trying to hide a crack? Okay.
Oh, see,
yep.
I can see why that would be suspicious.
Yep. And hammered. I mean, this is also probably late 90s now. The RockShox fork on there can't be serviced anymore, but it was also for rim brakes, which was fine, but missing the brake studs that the brake screw into.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so that's a problem.
Disaster.
Right?
It's a bit of a disaster.
It was a disaster. It was a disaster. And, I kind of went over a thing. I said, you're better off finding an intact used bike for as much as this would cost you getting one full bike. And your sort of mint vintage Trek, it has some value, not a lot of value, but it has some value, and I worthy of putting up for sale, taking that money and buying it.
The other one should be recycled, and the first one should be sold so that he could then use that to fund anything new.
That Specialized was definitely
well loved.
Yeah, it was pretty much recycling fodder. Yeah.
And I would also say, and kind of back to the don't rush to buy a bike, don't underestimate the option that you might have to borrow a bike from a friend, right? Like my cousin who did Vermont Overland last year didn't have time to think about what he would need for a gravel bike. He had a friend who had two, right? So he was able to borrow one. The woman that we were seeing this week was riding a friend's extra mountain bike. And I said, if she's going to let you ride it, then ride it as long as you can until you can find the right thing. Yep. So I think a lot of us do have some extra bikes in our garage that for special friends, you can borrow, you can get to see what you like. It's kind of like your own personal demo.
Sure, if you have,
if you have
opportunity there, that's a good.
I just feel like cycling people I want to say the most optimistic thing, but I think cycling people love cycling and we want all other people to be riding bikes, and we will often let you borrow our bikes, especially if we have an extra one. Just be nice to them. I'm still scarred from when we let someone borrow my new cyclocross bike years ago, and I watched him break the chain on Facebook. So, because he was so strong. Okay, so that's if you need a bike, right? Need or want a bike. What if you have a bike? What is the best way we can avoid tariffs with the bikes that we have?
Well, keeping them running, right?
Back to service.
Yeah, always comes back to service.
Right.
Right. So, so for a lot of people, it's going to be maybe holding off on getting a new bike. And so keeping that current bike running longer.
Right. Try to get them two things before things become catastrophic.
Yeah.
Right. And replace those chains.
The very first thing that I always harp on is keep the bike clean.
So clean your bike, service your bike.
Keep those chains replaced as needed.
We talked about that last week.
Yes.
That it can make a really big difference. Yep. Replace parts as needed.
Yes.
They will be tariffed, but it is still less than a whole
new bike.
And then if you are right on the cusp of you wanted to get a new bike, maybe you can talk to your shop about some upgrades that would give you some of the performance that you want.
Yes.
Right.
And I do get people. There are sort of two sets of people that I see who come in and ask about bigger upgrades, not just servicing and replacing the worn parts. I'm talking about full drivetrain upgrades because it's older and so forth.
Yeah.
I see people with older mountain bikes that, let's say a guy comes in with 26-inch wheels. It's sort of bad, what we're going to call bad geometry nowadays.
Yes.
It's just not modern.
Old.
And I want to get a feel. If you really like how this rides, then yes, let's talk about upgrading it.
Right.
Sometimes there are things that start to throw that off the rails, such as forks that can no longer be serviced and rear shocks that are, there could be bigger parts problems. So that's one side of the coin where I get people with mountain bikes that they would really enjoy a more modern mountain bike. So is it really worth upgrading?
Right.
And then the people who have mountain bikes that they do really enjoy how it rides, just things are just worn out, or they have an old 2x or 3x setup. And then there's a good conversation about, you really like how this rides. There's a bunch of good bones to work with here, so let's work with you on figuring out an upgrade here. You
had one customer that had the bike wasn't that old. I recognized it as something you had sold. It was a Scott mountain bike. And he said his friends kept telling him he had to upgrade, but he brought it to you and you gave it all the love. And he was like, rides like a new bike. Right. Loved it. He was so happy. We saw him at an event. He was pointing it out to me. Your husband, what a job he did on this. But I didn't need to everybody told me I had to upgrade my whole bike. But he did a great job. And I'm not really sure what you had done to it, but he was thrilled. And there is something for just some people want to make the most of what they already own.
One thing you're going to hear a lot of is sort of this general 5-year thing. Oh, yes. That's older than 5 years. So bikes have gotten, mountain bikes have gotten way better. And so maybe you're better upgrading. That 5-year rule has aged a little bit.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say it's really now more 8-9 years.
Yeah.
In that an 8 or 9, there are many 8 or 9 year old mountain bike frames that are still modern enough that they're worthy of upgrading.
Yes.
So keep that in mind. It is no longer that 5 year.
Okay.
Mountain bikes have been good for a little longer than that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there haven't been changes, but and then on road bikes, now road bikes are a different story. Road bikes have not, except for disc brakes, road bikes haven't really changed. So it can absolutely be worth it to upgrade an older road bike.
Okay.
The biggest issue I see is that there are some older frames that only still take the 23 millimeter tires.
Yes. Yes.
Still perfectly good road bike if you want to use it, but certainly around here when people start riding 28s or 30s or 32 millimeter tires at a lower pressure, it's just a world of difference. It's just so much more comfortable. So there's a little bit to look at there. Not every old road bike is worthy, but a lot are.
Well, I think my experience with road bikes, and I'll throw gravel into these, is how big a tire can I get onto this frame? That's a question I hear you get asked a lot. Mm-hmm. How much can I adjust the gearing? Imagine I came in with my Le Mans road bike. Mm-hmm. And I said to you, I want a dinner plate of a climbing gear on the back of this, similar to my gravel. Is that possible?
Well, road bikes don't get that kind of gravel bike gearing.
Okay.
Even still.
Yes.
All right. But on a road bike, you're going to be doing 2x.
Okay.
So yes, you can get much easier gears than you certainly could 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of certainly 90s road bikes, except for the tire limitation that if you want something bigger, anything 90s and newer is likely worthwhile to upgrade if you really like how the bike feels. Yeah. I had a guy, in terms of Le Mans, I had a guy just asked the other day about his, I can't remember the year, but it was in that vintage in terms of road bikes, and he was wondering about, he really likes it. He uses it for a couple big road events a year, and I said, then that's totally worthwhile to upgrade. Yeah. It gets, when you start, even some 80s bikes, that's where you start to get on that cusp of whether the bike is worth it or not. Okay. Just because of how they were. And then when you get into the 70s, that is where it really starts to fall off on it's not worthwhile, because they were quite different bikes. And a lot of bikes in the 70s were based, they looked like road bikes. They were road bikes. They had drop bars. Yes. But they were consumer road bikes that were almost designed after racing bikes. And because they didn't have hybrids back then. Right. So if you were a casual rider, you didn't get a flat barred bike. You got a dropped barred road looking bike.
Yes, I did.
And the position of those things was just horrible. Yeah. They weren't meant, they didn't have hoods that you were meant to hold on to. Yep. You were almost meant to be in the drops. And way over the front, long reaches, very tall standovers, just not.
So those bikes tend to be, when they come in for an upgrade, or those tend to be because someone has a soft spot love for them. Yes. Not necessarily because it is a quote unquote smart choice. Right. It's an emotional choice, and that's okay. I remember you rehabbing this Bianchi, and the guy was just so happy. Like, he was just like, I love this bike. I just love it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even know if he's riding it, but he loved it. And so for him, it was completely worth.
And I think that was an 80s Bianchi steel frame. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a good one. I think that's it on tariffs at this point. I mean, as we said, there's a lot we don't know right now. Mm-hmm. We know they're in effect. We don't know how long they're going to be in effect. We don't know how it's going to impact prices. We don't know how it's going to impact inventory.
Yes. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know.
We just did a show on all the stuff we don't know. My timing, by the way, if we can move on from this topic, my timing is impeccable because, of course, I decided to upgrade my mountain bike with a brand new mountain bike and brand new parts and brand new. I have excellent timing. Look what I got. Ooh.
She's showing off her new SRAM Motive brakes.
Okay, I have one question. They're called SRAM Motive Silver. They're black. Why?
Yeah. So we have.
Why are they black?
We have Are you ready for this? We have the SRAM Motive Ultimates, which is their top spec. Okay, the SRAM Motive Ultimate is silver colored. Then we have the Motive Silver, which is the second tier, but it's black colored. And then we have the Motive Bronze, which is also black grayish color, I believe. So
it's not Motive Gold, like it's Motive Ultimate, Motive Silver, Motive Bronze, but the is silver and the silver is black.
But the Motive Ultimate Silver and the Motive Silver is black.
Speaking of parts, one of the parts, and I think this ties into, we're going to call this a scene while scrolling. We have to figure out my shock situation. Right. And we were watching racing. And
this weekend is the first Mountain Bike World Cup race in Brazil. It's going to be the same venue next weekend. And so we watched that yesterday and today.
Yeah, and I hope you like red because all the women had the RockShox Sid in my favorite color, red. But then you couldn't find it.
No, so I went to SRAM's website, not there. I went to my dealer website, not there. And then I went to the Google.
Yes.
And there was no chatter about this. Where are people talking about? Okay. So I just responded to SRAM's Instagram account on one of their posts, which showed the red fork, and I said, this is coming to everybody.
Right. So I'm probably not going to get the red because it doesn't match the prettiness that I've selected. But we were talking about forks.
We were talking about the rear shock, right?
Oh, or is that okay? So I have to decide. So you decide on the shocks. I have to decide what travel I want. One is based on what my bike can do. My bike can do
100 to 120 depending on what shock and fork you put in there.
Okay.
Well, so the rear shock was either going to be a RockShox Sid.
Okay.
So they also make a Sid labeled rear shock.
Okay.
Or it's going to be a Fox. The RockShox Sid doesn't have any adjustment levers on it.
Okay.
Their RockShox does make another shock though.
Meaning like reach down between my legs and adjust?
Yes, we could do a remote operated one, but you tend not to use those, so I don't think we're going to use that.
Yes.
So they do make another shock which does have that control on it with a flip lever on the shock body itself.
Yes.
So that's the Deluxe Ultimate. So there is also the Super Deluxe Ultimate. That is their piggyback shock, which has the extra reservoir on it. Now, that would be overkill for your bike. We're not going to get one of those.
The Super Deluxe Ultimate.
The Super Deluxe Ultimate.
That is the name of the shock?
Yes.
That's how I tell it's different from the
Deluxe Ultimate.
Ultimate? Mm-hmm. There's some real Kenergy going on with these names.
Yes.
And I'm starting to think that this is intentional. Like, I feel like the average, how does someone like me know what the difference is between is there an Ultimate?
There's not just a plain Ultimate.
There's not just a plain Ultimate. No. That would be crazy. No. That was, okay.
So you take their model and then you add on Ultimate for their top level spec. So in the forks, they'll have a Sid Ultimate and they'll have a Lyric Ultimate and they'll have a Pike Ultimate.
Okay.
And then in the rear shocks, they will have ones called the Ultimate, but they'll also have ones called the Select. So those are the lower spec
Select
ones.
is lower.
Yes. And they'll have Select Plus.
Then what?
Now, Select Plus is usually only found on new bikes. You can't buy aftermarket.
So you have Select.
Yes.
Select Plus.
Right.
You have Ultimate.
Yes.
And then you have Ultimate Supreme.
No, the Ultimate Supreme. No, that's it.
That's it. Okay. Sure. Very clear on that one. No wonder it's, I swear, I mean, I'm a professional communicator, so let me just say that. But I swear bike manufacturers do these things on purpose to make things as confusing as possible for someone. I also, the fact that don't like mountain bikes and road bikes use just completely different measurements. Like, how do you decide the size? If you're a large mountain bike, that's not anywhere close to being a large road bike. Like, how would you, the measurements on
we
them?
mentioned earlier how in the 90s, mountain bikes came in inch sizes. So you would get like a 17-inch frame, a 19-inch frame, a 21-inch frame. And now, of course, mountain bikes are all extra small, medium, large. Whereas road bikes and gravel bikes maintained their number measurement, which is typically based off of the length of the seat tube.
Okay.
But they all measure a little differently because it could be from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the top tube, or to the top of the top tube, or to the top of the seat collar, which could be rise above the seat tube or the top tube a little bit. So that's why you can't quite compare exact same sizes between brands.
Right.
They're going to be close.
You would think as a woman in the world who has to buy clothing, I'd be used to this since, a 6 is not a 6 across the board.
And because of sloped top tubes, sometimes that number is virtual if the top tube was actually level to the ground.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. We do have one listener comment. Kyle wrote in. Kyle said, something that has come up twice in recent rides in the woods. What to do when you ride near horses? Turns out I was being asked to keep talking, especially if behind the horse. They told me it did not matter if I rode or walked, but keep talking in a normal voice allows the horses to know you're there, not a threat. I thought of your podcast and it might be something to share. I had no idea. Maybe everyone else does. I do love listening. Thanks, Kyle. Okay. I agree that it's always worth repeating how to pass a horse because they are the scariest little big beasties ever, trying to pass them. Yes, you want to speak naturally. You want to ask the rider what they would like you to do. You want to make sure the horse knows you're a human.
Generally just talking and the horse knows you're a human.
Yeah.
Because you are a big contraption with your bike and your helmet and so forth. And as long as you're talking, then the rider assumes you are a person. Right.
Just be good. I was thinking the other day about the etiquette because, of course, bikes have no right of way. Right, everyone has right of way over cyclists in the trails, but how it doesn't always actually translate that way. So horses, yes, they get right of way. Often, when you're in the woods on trails, while the walker has the right of way, they almost always will just step off.
Almost always.
They almost always.
It's just easier for everybody.
That's what I'm saying. But technically, they have the right of way. But it practically doesn't. It doesn't ever work out that way. In fact, the only time this last weekend when I was riding with our daughter, I thought we passed a bunch of walkers in the woods and they stepped off. And then one group was coming up and I pulled over because I was like, that is what we're supposed to do. I'm just curious what this feels like to step. And they were completely confused. They were like, what are you doing? And I was like, no, you have the right of way. Go ahead. And they're like, oh, we do. Turned out it was a friend. So it worked out well. We got to say hello. But it doesn't really work out that way.
No.
Ever.
No.
So just again, etiquette, rules. All different. All right. Well, I think we have gone way over. So let's wrap this up. Cycling Together with Kristin and Steve is a production of Steve the Bike Guy, an independent bicycle shop in Eastern Massachusetts, and Sundin Marketing. If you like the show, please leave a review or share with a friend. For show notes, links, or to leave a comment, question, or topic suggestion, visit cyclingtogether.bike. And you can follow the shop on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Steve the Bike Guy. Thanks for joining the ride. All right. We'll see you next time. In the component world, there are a lot of options.
So wolf tooth is a great one.
Okay.
And for, say, your chain rings and headsets and like knickknacks in terms of of bike parts. And who else? We have Industry 9.
Don't look at me. I don't know.